Shall I start the class?
Yes.
All of you mute your devices. Good morning, one and all. Today we are going to discuss about CPU scheduling algorithms.
इसे मैम को सकते हैं आपने
Mute your devices first.
बाजार के लिए नहीं है
Okay, before going to discuss about scheduling algorithms, I already told you in yesterday's class, please go through some topics. What are those? One is what is preemptive algorithms and what are non-preemptive algorithms. And the next question is what is a dispatcher? So these are the things you need to know before going to discuss about the scheduling algorithms. Okay. And next to which scheduler will schedule the CPU to process? The short-term scheduler is responsible for allocating CPU to the process, which are available in the ready queue. Okay. Now we are in the scheduling. In the scheduling, so whenever the CPU become idle, automatically the short-term scheduler will select one process in the ready queue and allocate it to the CPU. Okay, the process will be assigned CPU. Okay, for example, there are 10 programs in the job pool in the secondary memory. From those 10, 3 processes are switched to ready queue or moved to ready queue. Okay, the responsibility of long-term scheduler is to select a subset of programs from secondary memory and keep them in the main memory, that is in the ready queue. That is the responsibility of long-term scheduler. We had a discussion about all those things, but let me rewind the topic for you. Okay, so for example, there is a job queue. What is a job queue? What it contains? The job queue contains all the programs. The job queue contains all the programs. Okay, from those programs, the long-term scheduler. The long-term scheduler will schedule or select few or subset of programs and keep them in the ready queue. Ready queue means in main memory, right? Job queue is in the secondary memory and next to ready queue means the programs are in the main memory. Okay, what for they are in the main memory? They are waiting for the CPU. For example, here we have 10 programs. In those 10, only 3 programs are moved to ready queue. Only 3 programs are moved to ready queue. So it is the responsibility of long-term scheduler. These 3 programs need to be a mix of IO bound, and CPU bound. Okay, that is the thing. What is CPU bound? CPU bound means process require more IO operations than computation. So that is called as IO bound process. What is CPU bound process? That means process requires more CPU cycles for computation and less IO operations. Okay, this is the CPU bound and that is IO bound. So it is the responsibility of a long-term scheduler to select a mix of IO bound and CPU bound process and keep it in the ready queue. Okay. So if all the programs are CPU bound, what happened? All programs are CPU bound. What happened? At that time, all process requires CPU. Okay. So that P1 requires CPU, P2 requires CPU time, and P3 also CPU bound. All requires more CPU cycles. At that time,
అన్నయ్య దగ్గర
CPU
ఉంచిపోయాయని
has to wait for
వినపడలేదు.
నేను ఆ రోజు
తీసుకున్నా
ఇచ్చేసాక అప్పుడు ఇక్కడే ఇచ్చేసి వెళ్ళిపోయాను బ్యాగ్ లో చూడు
right. P1 requires CPU, so automatically we have assigned P1 CPU, and next P2 is waiting for CPU which was already allocated to P1. So P2 is waiting for CPU much time, and P2 is also require much CPU, more CPU cycles. So P3 is are waiting for P1 and P2. When these two things complete the CPU utilization, then the CPU will be allocated to P3. That means the processors which are available in the main memory are wait for the CPU more time. So waiting time will be more if the all the processors are CPU bound. Are you got my point? So P1 requires more CPU time, and P2 requires more CPU time, and P3 requires more CPU time. So what happened? All these are in the ready queue, waiting for the CPU. So initially we allocated CPU to P1. So automatically P2 will wait for CPU. Okay, whenever the P1 completes its task, automatically CPU will be assigned to or switched to P2. So P2 also requires more CPU time. So P3 has to wait until P1 and P2 releases the CPU. So if all are CPU bound, automatically the process which are waiting in the ready queue or get the CPU by late. Okay, they cannot get the CPU immediately. It will take time to get the CPU. Why? Because the process which are front in the queue will get the CPU first, so that automatically the P3 has to wait much time. Okay, and the next one, if all are IO bound, for example, that means P1 requires more IO operations, P2 also require more IO operations, and P3 also requires more of IO operations. That means all the processes are in the ready queue requires more IO time, IO operations time. They are least bothered about the computation, CPU computation. So automatically what happened? If these three processors not require the CPU much time, so automatically those three are in the ready queue. There is no other process. So automatically what will happen? CPU will be idle most of the time. If all are IO bound process, they require IO operations. In order to do the IO operations, there is no need of CPU. In order to do the IO operations, input output operation means reading the information from a disk, writing the information to a disk. So reading and writing, there is no involvement of CPU. So automatically P1 don't require the CPU much time. P2 also don't require the CPU time, and P3 also not require much CPU cycles. Why? Because P1, P2 and P3 all are IO bound. So that CPU will become ideal. That means if all the processes in the ready queue are IO bound, then CPU will become the idle. If all processes are CPU bound, so that every process has to wait for the CPU much time. Why? Because all the remaining processes also requires the more CPU cycle. So that is the problem with the situation. That is a problem with IO bound and CPU bound process. That is the reason why the long-term scheduler has to select a subset of programs. Long-term scheduler has to select subset of programs from the job queue and keep them in the ready queue. Those subset of processes need to be a combination of CPU bound and IO bound. That means mix. mix of CPU bound and IO bound process need to be kept in the ready queue. Okay. And next, now the long-term scheduler select programs from secondary memory job queue to, it selects programs from job queue and keep it in the ready queue. Ready queue means in the main memory. They are waiting for the 3 programs, for example, P1, P2, P3. From P1 to P10 are total number of programs available in the job queue. From those 10 programs, long-term scheduler selects 3 programs and keep it in the ready queue. So all these 3 are waiting for the CPU now. So automatically CPU will be allocated to one of the 3 processes which are in the ready queue. Okay. So automatically to whom we need to assign the CPU? We need to assign the CPU for P1, or we need to assign the CPU for P2, or we need to assign the CPU for P3. For which one we need to assign the CPU? So that will be decided by the short-term scheduler. The short-term scheduler will assign the CPU to one of the process. CPU to one among them. So there are 3 processes in the main memory ready queue. So in those 3, the short-term scheduler will select. The short-term scheduler select only one process and assign to the CPU. Okay, that is the role of short-term scheduler. Okay. And next point what you need to understand is, based upon which criteria the short-term scheduler will select one process among the 3. So where the scheduling algorithms came into picture. Okay, the scheduling algorithm what we are using, based upon that one of the process allocates to the CPU. There are variety of scheduling algorithms like FCFS, and then shortest job first, priority, round robin. Like that we have multi-level scheduling, like that multi-level feedback scheduling, like that we have so many scheduling algorithms. Based upon the scheduling algorithm what we are using to select one process from the ready queue and assign to the CPU. Okay, it is based upon the requirement. If we are following the first come first serve, automatically the process which came into the ready queue first will get the CPU first. If it is the shortest job, then automatically the process which requires less CPU time will be assigned the CPU first. If you are going for the priority algorithm, automatically the highest priority process will get the CPU first. And next, if it is a round robin algorithm, automatically we give a time quantum. For example, 2 milliseconds of time we assign to P1, and then we switch it to P2, and then 2 milliseconds are assigned to P2. Like that, it will be switch from one process to another process until all the process completes its execution. Okay, so it is the responsibility of a short-term scheduler. It is the responsibility of a short-term scheduler to select one process among the all processes which are in the ready queue. Okay. Now there are 2 varieties of schedulings. One is a non-preemptive scheduling and the second one is a preemptive scheduling. What is preemptive scheduling and what is non-preemptive scheduling? What is preemptive scheduling and what is non-preemptive scheduling? I already told you. Go through the topic once. Anyone can have an answer? Anyone can give the answer? What is preemptive scheduling and what is non-preemptive scheduling? Okay, total scheduling algorithms are divided into 2 types: preemptive scheduling algorithms and the non-preemptive scheduling algorithms. Non-preemptive means, for example, if you assign the CPU to one process, let's say P1, so automatically until the completion is over. Until whenever the P1 completes its execution, till the time the CPU will be assigned to P1 only. That means P1 will never release the CPU. P1 will never release the CPU until the termination. Until the termination. That means if you assign the CPU to one process, P1, the process will never release the CPU until the termination or IO wait. That means if a process is busy with IO operation, at that time automatically CPU switch to some other process according to the CPU switching. Okay, but the process will never release the CPU until it completes its termination. Again, after IO operation is over, again the CPU will be assigned to process 1 only. That means the process will never release the CPU until its termination. That is called as non-preemptive algorithm. Then what about preemptive algorithm? For example, CPU is assigned to one process, let's say P1. Okay, so while executing the P1, suddenly the high priority process came into ready queue. High priority process, for example, P2 is came into ready queue. Where the ready queue is available in the main memory. That means P2 is suddenly came to main memory from secondary memory for execution. So automatically CPU is executing P1. CPU is executing P1. Suddenly P2 is came into the ready queue. So what the scheduler will do? Automatically from P1, from the P1, the CPU will be allocated to P2. That means P1 is not completes its execution. Still CPU is executing P1. So while executing the process 1, suddenly a high priority process came into the main memory, ready queue. So automatically from the P1, the CPU switched to P2. That is called as preemption. Okay, that is one case. And the second case, in the case of round robin, what I told you, in the case of round robin, we are giving a time slice, right? We are giving a time slice. What is it? So for example, P1, P2, P3. This example also we have covered. P1 requires 4 milliseconds to complete its execution. P2 requires 2 milliseconds of CPU time to complete the execution, and P3 requires 6 milliseconds of time to complete the execution. So automatically in the case of round robin, the time quantum. So time quantum is 2 milliseconds, right? So automatically that means for each process we would like to give 2 milliseconds of CPU time. So initially the CPU will be allocated to P1. So automatically after 2 milliseconds, whether the P1 completes its execution or not, automatically CPU is switched to P2, right? Automatically switched. Actually P1 requires 4 milliseconds of time, but the time quantum is only 2 milliseconds. That CPU time quantum we would like to assign to individual process is only 2 milliseconds. So because of that reason, whether the process completes its execution or not, automatically CPU switched from one process to another process. Again after 2 milliseconds, again after 2 milliseconds, whether it completes the execution or not, CPU will be switched to some other process, that is P3. That is P3. So after 2 milliseconds, whether P3 completes its execution or not, again it will be switched to P1. Like that, after time quantum is over, once the time quantum expires, the CPU will be automatically switched from one process to other process, even the process completes its termination or not. That is called as preemptive. In the previous case also, CPU is executing process 1. The high priority process came into ready queue. So automatically, even P1 is not completes its execution, still we are switching the CPU from P1 to P2. So that is called as preemption. These are the cases under preemption. Okay. And what is non-preemptive? Once we allocate the CPU to any process, okay, the CPU will be allocated to the same process until the termination, or IO wait, comes. Okay, that is about preemption and non-preemption. And next, one more thing I already told you to check, that is a dispatcher. What is a dispatcher? So dispatcher is nothing but it is a module. What is the functionality of this dispatcher module? It will select one process from ready queue and actually that means from those one process, after selection, what we have to do? We need to allocate CPU to process. Okay, select one process from ready queue and assign to CPU. Okay, CPU will be allocated to process. It means, okay, that means from that particular point of time, CPU will ready to execute that particular process, what was selected from the ready queue. Okay, the dispatcher is responsible for switching from one process to other process. All those things what we talk about the CPU, the switching of CPU, and again assign the one program for many programs, assign CPU to one program among the many process. That means in the ready queue there are so many number of programs. From those programs only one program will be assigned to CPU. So all these things will be done by the dispatcher. Okay, can I go to the scheduling algorithms? Can I move to scheduling algorithms?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So before going to go to the scheduling algorithms, we need to talk about scheduling criteria. So under the scheduling criteria, we have a different sub concepts. One is the CPU utilization, and the next one is throughput, and the next one is waiting time, turnaround time, that's it, waiting time, response time, right? So these are the things we need to cover under the scheduling criteria. First of all, what is CPU utilization? That means we need to keep the CPU always busy. That means we need to utilize the CPU in well manner so that the system performance will be more. The system performance will be more. Okay. The system performance will be more. And the next, throughput. What is the throughput? Number of programs or processes executed per unit time. So that is called as throughput. If CPU is busy running with the process, so automatically CPU can execute more number of process. If the CPU execute more number of process, automatically throughput will be more. So when the throughput will be more, automatically the system performance is also more. Okay, that is about throughput. And the next one, waiting time. So waiting time means time spent on ready queue. Time spent on ready queue. Why the process spend time in the ready queue? That means at that time the process is waiting for the CPU. Okay, so that is called as waiting time. The process which spend time on ready queue, that is called as waiting time. And next, what is turnaround time? Turnaround time means turnaround time. That means total time. The turnaround time is a total spent time from submission to completion. Submission to completion. That means it includes all the time waiting in the ready queue, and then after that, and once it is in the ready queue, we are submitted for the execution, right? From that point, how much time CPU executed that particular process, what is the wait time, and next when we get the output. So everything, when it completes the, until it completes the execution. That means from submission to completion, how much time it takes to complete the process. How much time it takes to complete the process from submission to completion. How much time it takes. It is called as turnaround time. And the response time. Response time means here we are not getting the final output. Initial response to the time. Time it takes to get initial response from a process. Okay, when you are executing your program, initially it asks you to enter something, enter a value for A. You are enter the value 10. That means it is not the final output, right? Again, it asks you to enter value for B. After that, it calculates 10 plus 20 and then it will give you 30. The final result is 30, right? So, but whenever the program start responding to the user, the time it takes to respond to the user. So that is called as response time. So all these are comes under scheduling criteria. Okay. If you have any doubt, you can go through the PPT. So what is, before going to PPT, first what is non-preemptive scheduling? Once the CPU has been allocated to a process, as I told you, the CPU will be allocated to the same process until it completes the execution. That means the process will never release it. The process will never release it until it releases the CPU, either by terminating or by switching to the waiting state. The process keeps the CPU. It never releases the CPU. That is called as non-preemptive scheduling. What is preemptive scheduling? So the process can be interrupted and the process can be preempted. Preempted means it will be allocated to the some other process. For example, P1 CPU is allocated to process P1 and the high priority process came into the ready queue. What we are doing? So P1 will be interrupted and P1 from P1 to P2. The CPU is switched from P1 to P2. That is called as preempting. Okay. And next, what is dispatcher? So as I told you, dispatcher is a module. What it will do? So it will give the control of CPU to the process selected by the short-term scheduler. So that means short-term scheduler will select one process from the main memory from the ready queue. That means from the ready queue. After that, the dispatcher will give the control of the CPU to the process. And as I told you, dispatcher is responsible for switching context and switching to user mode and next restarting the program. That means once you complete the IO operation or once you complete some task, so automatically we move from waiting state to ready state. So whenever we are moving from waiting state to ready state, again the same process need to be allocated to the CPU, right? That means again this process has to move from ready state to running state. Like that, I already told you when we had a discussion about the process states. So in the process life cycle, the process is moving from one state to another state. So whenever it is coming from running state to waiting state, after the IO operation, the process will go to the ready state, from waiting state to ready state. Again, it will be assigned to CPU for execution. For example, so initially it is in the new state. So after that it will move to the ready state. After that it will move to the running state. So running state means CPU is executing the program. So after what happened, whenever there is a IO, here the dispatcher came into picture. Okay, dispatcher came into picture, right? So whenever there is IO operation, again the process will move to waiting state. Okay, after IO event complete, after IO complete, what it will do? Again the process will be moved to ready state. From the ready state, again the process will be switch to the running state. Each time the dispatcher will play the role. Okay, and then one more time, not only the IO, for example, if any interrupt happened, automatically CPU switched from running state to ready state, again from ready state to running state. Okay, so after the end of the execution, it will move to the terminate state, right? That is the thing. That is the role of dispatcher. Dispatcher will came into picture here. Okay. These are the scheduling criteria. I already told you CPU utilization means we need to keep the CPU as busy as possible. If the CPU is busy, automatically CPU can execute more number of process. If CPU execute more number of process, automatically throughput increases. What is a throughput? Throughput is number of process completed per unit time. If it is the CPU can able to complete more number of process per unit time, automatically throughput will be more. Whenever the throughput will be more, automatically system performance will be more. Why? Because throughput is a measure for system performance. Like we measure milk in liters, right? Measure sugar in kgs. Like that, system performance will be measured with the throughput. Okay. And the next one, turnaround time. Turnaround time means the total interval from time of submission to time of completion. It may be waiting in the ready queue or executing the CPU or doing IO. So all the times are added, accumulated to each other, and finally the time for submission to completion, the total time is called as turnaround time. And the next, waiting time. Waiting time means spent waiting in the ready queue, only waiting in the ready queue for the CPU. It is called as waiting time. The waiting time need to be low. Turnaround time need to be low. In these scheduling criteria, which one need to be high, which one need to be low? CPU utilization need to be more. Throughput need to be more. Number of process executing per unit time need to be more. Turnaround time need to be less. Why? Because from submission to completion, the process requires less time for the completion. Then only we can complete more number of process per unit time, right? So turnaround time need to be low. And waiting time. Waiting time means the process waiting in the ready queue. The process waiting in the ready queue. It also need to be less. Why? Because if it is waiting for the waiting for the CPU much time, so automatically each and every process will get the CPU. Will get the CPU. And for example, ready queue enter into the process enter into the main memory and waiting for the CPU. If it takes much time to get the CPU, automatically it takes much time for complete the process, right? Why? Because the turnaround time is total waiting time in the ready queue also we calculated. That means once we load the process into the main memory, once we load the process into the main memory that is in the ready queue, so it will be also calculated when you calculate the turnaround time. One second. Excuse me. Okay, so the turnaround time, that means, sorry, waiting time means the CPU waiting in the ready queue for the, sorry, the process waiting in the ready queue for the CPU. For example, if a process waiting for the CPU much time, automatically what happened? It takes much time for completing the process. Why? Because the turnaround time means the time of submission to time of completion. The time of submission to time of completion means, so we need to consider the waiting time of a process also. Okay. That is the reason why the waiting time need to be less. If the waiting time need to, when the waiting time is less, automatically the process can be allocated to the CPU immediately. When the process allocated to the CPU immediately, then automatically CPU can complete the execution in a faster manner. If it is waiting more time, automatically it is also calculated in the turnaround time, right? That is the reason why waiting time need to be less. And the next one is the response time. The response time means, so after the submission to the first response, submission to first response, the time is called as response time. Is a time from the submission of a request until the first response. That is called as, it is not the final output, first response to the user. So this is called as response time. So all these 5 are comes under scheduling criteria. CPU utilization need to be more, throughput is need to be more, turnaround time need to be less, waiting time need to be less, and the response time also need to be less, so that we can get the faster response. First response from the process. That is called as how much time to take to get the first response after the submission of a process. So that is called as response time. Okay, and next move to first come first serve. Okay, all the scheduling algorithms I don't want to read the PPT. Why? Because all these are the problematic. So why to go to the PPT? I will explain you all the scheduling algorithms with the help of a pen so that you have a better idea, right? First, let me show you what is Gantt chart and what is. So initially, so we have this type of problem, processes and then burst time. Burst time means how much CPU time required to complete the process. Burst time means how much CPU time requires to complete the process. Okay, P1, P2, P3. These three processes are in the ready queue. Okay, P1 requires 24 milliseconds of time to complete its task. P2 requires 3 milliseconds of CPU time to complete its task. P3 requires 3 milliseconds of CPU time to complete its task. Okay. What is the problem? So under the process, we have P1, P2 and P3. And next under the burst time, 24, 3, 3. Okay. Burst time means the CPU time. How much time a process requires to complete its execution. Okay. Now you need to draw the Gantt chart. Gantt chart. We need to draw the Gantt chart. That is your first task. This is your problem. This is the problem. You will get in the question paper. So what will you need to do? What you have to do? Sorry, what you have to do? You need to show Gantt chart, draw the Gantt chart, and next you need to calculate average waiting time. You need to calculate average waiting time. So these are the two tasks you have to do. Okay. The first one, Gantt chart. So first, what is the algorithm we are going to discuss? FCFS. FCFS means first come, first serve. First come, first serve. That means the process came into the ready queue first, will get the CPU first. For example, in which fashion they are coming? First P1 enter into the ready queue. After that P2 enter into the ready queue. After that P3 enter into the ready queue. Okay. Likewise, these three processes are enter into the ready queue like this. For example, this is operating system, main memory operating system. First P1 enter into the main memory. After that P2 enter into the main memory. After that P3 enter into the main memory, for example. Okay, then automatically in those three, which process will get the CPU first? P1 will get the CPU first. Why? Because P1 enter into the ready queue first. That is the reason why CPU will allocate to the P1 first. Why? Because first come, first serve. Who will enter into the ready queue first? Who will or better? Wait a second. There is a problem. I couldn't write on the pad. Let me check. I think it is not working. Right, there might be a problem with the right pad. So sorry for the inconvenience made. So I will try to explain you with the PPT now. So in the next class, we'll go to the right pad, right? So here in our example, P1 and P2, P3. So this is the order of arrival to the ready queue. P1 arrived to the ready queue first. After that, P2 came into the ready queue. After that, P3 came into the ready queue. In those three process, which process will came into the ready queue first? P1 process came into the ready queue first. So automatically we assign CPU to P1. So automatically P1 completes its execution. P1 completes its execution from 0. 0 means initially we allocated the CPU to P1. Why? Because P1 came into the ready queue first. So from 0 to how much time it requires to complete the execution? 24 milliseconds of CPU time required for the P1 to complete its execution. So automatically 0 to 24. So P1 completes its execution. Once P1 completes its execution, automatically CPU is allocated to the next process. Which process came into the ready queue next? P2 process came into the ready queue next after P1. So automatically we allocate CPU to P2. How much time P2 requires to complete its execution? 3 milliseconds. So 24 milliseconds for P1. After that from 24 to 3 milliseconds for P2. Okay. After that who enter into the system, ready queue? P3 enter into the ready queue. So how much time it requires? 3 milliseconds. So from 27 to 3 and 30. Okay, 27 to 3 means 30. Okay. So this is Gantt chart. This is called as Gantt chart. So from the Gantt chart, you need to calculate the average waiting time. Okay. How much time P1 is waiting for the CPU? P1 is not waiting for the CPU. Why? Because it is the process came into the ready queue first. So immediately whenever it enter into the ready queue, there is no process in the ready queue. So automatically CPU will be allocated to the process 1 at 0th second. So the waiting time of P1 is 0. So 0. Okay. After that, so P2 get the CPU. But P2 has to wait until P1 completes its execution. P2 has to wait until P1 completes the execution. So the waiting time of P2 is 24. So 0 plus 24. And then what is the waiting time of P3? P3 has to wait until P1 and P2 both complete its execution. So automatically the waiting time of P3 is 27. So 0 for P1 waiting time and 24 is the P2 waiting time. 27 is the P3 waiting time. So total number of processes are 3. So 0 plus 24 plus 27 by 3 equal to 17 milliseconds. So this is the average waiting time of a process. And then, so for example, if you run the programs like this, P2, P3, P1, okay, P2 requires 3 milliseconds of time, as you know, P2 requires 3, P3 requires 3, and P1 requires 24 milliseconds. Remember this one. P1 requires 24, P2 requires 3, P3 requires 3. So if the order is like this, for example, the process enter into the system in this order, P2, P3, P1. So P2, we assign the CPU first. So 0 to 3, and then P3 is the next process enter into the process. After that P1. So P2 requires 3 milliseconds and P3 requires 3 milliseconds to complete its execution, and P1 will get after 6 milliseconds. P1 will get the CPU after 6 milliseconds. So totally it requires 24 milliseconds. So 6 plus 24 is 30. So now calculate the waiting time. So P2 is not waiting for any process. Why? Because in the order P2 is the first process entered into the system, for example. So automatically P2 waiting time is 0. Observe here, P2 waiting time is 0. Observe the cursor. So P2 waiting time is 0. And next, what is the P3 waiting time? P3 has to wait until P2 completes its execution. That means P3 is coming next after the P2. So P3 is waiting for 3 milliseconds. So P3 waiting time is 3 milliseconds. And next, what is the third process entered into the main memory ready queue? P1. So P1 has to wait until P2 and P3 completes its execution. So waiting time of P1 is 6. Waiting time of P1 is 6. So 6 plus 0 plus 3. Total time is 9. 9 by 3 equal to 3 milliseconds. For example, if the process enter into the system in the previous fashion, P1, P2, P3 like this. The order is, if the order is P1, P2, P3, then the average waiting time is 17 milliseconds. Okay. If processes are entered in this fashion, the order is like P2, P3, P1, then what is the waiting time? The average waiting time is 3 milliseconds. Okay. And one more thing is, it is very important to understand. The FCFC scheduling algorithm is non-preemptive. Why? Because we assign CPU to P3 after it completes execution of P2. Okay. We assign CPU to P1 after P2 and P3 completes its execution. That means the process will never release the CPU until it completes the execution. So P2 never release the CPU in between the 3 milliseconds. Why? Because it requires 3 milliseconds of time, CPU time to complete its execution. Okay. After 3 milliseconds only, it will be, the CPU will be switched to P3. After 3 milliseconds only, the CPU will be allocated to P1. That means a CPU will be assigned, whenever the CPU will be assigned to a process, the CPU will be execute the process completely, then only the process will release the CPU to the next process. Okay. That is the reason why this particular FCFS algorithm is comes under non-preemptive. So the FCFC scheduling algorithm is non-preemptive. Once the CPU has been allocated to a process, that process keeps the CPU until it releases the CPU, either by terminating or by requesting an IO. Okay. So this is called as FCFS, the first CPU scheduling algorithm. And the next one, shortest job first. Shortest job first. Let me check the paint. It is whether working or not. Let me check. Okay. So I will do one thing. We'll try to open the paint so that I am able to work with. Yes, it is working now. I think there is a problem with this. Are you able to see the screen? Are you able to see the screen now?
Yes, ma'am.
A paint is visible to you all.
No, ma'am.
Paint is not visible, right? So there is a problem with the paint application. So what happened? Okay, one thing I will do. Now I will try to open the paint. Now is it visible to you all?
Yes, ma'am.
So coming to shortest job first, right? So give me one example. Any example? These are the process. And next, give me your own values for the burst time. Give any value. 4, 5, like give any value. You there? Give me some values, ma. Burst values.
3,
3,
9,
9,
12,
12,
19.
19. So I'm using only 4. Why? Because the Gantt chart will be the more. That is the reason why. So we need to give a difference while you draw the Gantt chart. If you're giving a 12 milliseconds, so I need to give the much portion. Have you got my point?
Yes, ma'am.
If you, that is the reason the screen is not sufficient, right? So initially the name of the algorithm is shortest job first. In those 4 processes which requires less CPU time, which process requires less CPU time?
P1.
P1. So P1 will be the first process to get the CPU. Why? Because P1 CPU time is less, 511. Right? So after that P2. So how much P2, P3, P4. In those 3 process, which process is the shortest burst time?
P4, ma'am.
P4 has shortest burst time. So after P1, we will assign CPU to P4. If we observe, this portion is less than this portion. Why? Because it is 4 milliseconds and this is 3 milliseconds. While you draw the Gantt chart, you need to uh, consider this one. You need to consider this point. Okay? 3. So this portion need to be small. And it is 4. That means it is little bit more. This portion need to be little bit more. Okay? And then, so first process is a P1 and the second process is a P4 and among P2 and P3, which one is shortest job? Which one is the shortest?
P2.
P2. So P2 means 9. Okay. So automatically P2. 7 plus 9 means 16.
16.
Okay. And next the last one is
P3 process.
P3. Okay. So it is more than, it need to be 12. Okay. More than this portion. So 16 plus 9 means 25. So now tell me the waiting time of each process. How much time
Ma'am?
is
12, ma'am.
12, sorry, sir.
28.
28, okay, sir. It is 28. Now tell me the waiting time of each process. What is the waiting time of P1? 0. What is the waiting time of P2?
7 seconds.
7 milliseconds. What is the waiting time of P3?
16 milliseconds.
16. What is the waiting time of P4?
3 milliseconds.
So P4 waiting time is this one. P1 waiting time, P1 is not waiting for anyone to complete. So P1 0. P2 is waiting for P1 and P4. So the waiting time is 7. And P3 is waiting for the completion of P1, P4 and P2. So the waiting time is 16. And P4 is waiting for only P1. So the waiting time is P3. So average waiting time. So average waiting time means 0 plus P1, 7 plus P2, 16 plus P3 plus P4 by 4. So automatically 7 plus 3, 10 plus 26 by 4. 26 by 4 means 4, 6 point, I think 3 something milliseconds. Okay, this is the average waiting time. Okay. Is it okay for you? Are you able to understand this one?
Yes, ma'am.
Got it?
Yes, ma'am.
So far we completed. So SJF is a preemptive or non-preemptive?
Non-preemptive.
This is non-preemptive example. Okay. So afternoon we will talk about preemptive SJF. If time permit, I will explain preemptive and preemptive SJF and round robin and all the remaining algorithms in the afternoon class. If I have a slot in the afternoon, I will complete. Okay, so that we can finish the second unit. So most of you are not attending in the afternoon session. If it is a my slot in the afternoon session, so all you need to attend for the session. Okay, why? Because all are the problems. Okay, you will get the marks with a less effort. Okay. Thank you. So you might have another class. Bye.